The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the Reyes Soap Manufacturing building as Maria Santos clutched a blood-stained resignation letter in her trembling hands. Behind her, three teenagers, Elena, Miguel, and Sofia, stood defiantly. Between their mother and Father Antonio Cruz, whose face twisted with righteous fury. Carlos Reyes, the factory owner, stepped forward with deliberate calm, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles mixed with soap suds and tears. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. These street children have no place in a respectable business, Father Cruz declared, his voice echoing through the empty factory floor. Send them back to where they belong. Maria lifted her chin, years of poverty and loss etched into every line of her weathered face. My children belong wherever I am, she said, her voice barely audible above the storm. Carlos studied the woman who had transformed his failing factory into the most profitable soap business in Marikina City, then looked at the priest who held the power to destroy everything they had built together. Lightning illuminated the factory windows as Carlos made his choice. Then they stay, he said simply. What followed would test every bond they had forged and reveal secrets that would change their lives forever. 6 months earlier, the morning mist clung to the Pasig River like prayers left unanswered. Maria Santos walked the muddy banks collecting plastic bottles and aluminum cans, her worn sneakers squelching through the mixture of silt and urban waste that lined the water's edge. The typhoon had passed 3 days ago, leaving behind scattered debris and the persistent smell of floodwater that even the returning sunshine couldn't wash away. At 42, Maria moved with the efficient desperation of someone who had learned that survival required constant motion. Her small sari-sari store in Barangay San Isidro barely generated enough income to feed her 3 children, and the recent floods had damaged what little inventory she had managed to accumulate. The recyclables she collected each morning provided the peso coins that bought rice for dinner and hope for tomorrow. The industrial district of Marikina hummed to life around her as jeepneys began their daily routes and security guards unlocked the gates of various manufacturing facilities. Maria had walked this route for 2 years, ever since her husband Roberto died in a construction accident that left her with nothing but debt and 3 children who looked at her with the kind of trust that made her chest tighten with fear. She paused at the familiar chain-link fence that surrounded Reyes Soap Manufacturing, watching through the gaps as workers arrived for their morning shifts. The building itself was modest compared to the shoe factories that had made Marikina famous, but it hummed with an energy that spoke of prosperity. Steam rose from ventilation systems, and the sweet scent of coconut oil and lye drifted across the river, mixing with the industrial smells of progress and possibility. Maria had never allowed herself to imagine working inside such a place. Her education had ended in grade 6 when her parents could no longer afford the fees, and her hands bore the calluses and scars of 2 decades spent washing other people's laundry, cleaning houses, and running the tiny store that served her neighbors' daily needs for cigarettes, instant noodles, and cell phone load. But this morning, something was different. A handwritten sign hung on the factory gate, its words barely legible through the plastic covering that protected it from the rain. Seeking experienced soap makers and general laborers. Inquire within. Maria read the sign 3 times, her lips moving silently as she processed each word. Rosa Delgado, her closest friend before cancer took her 2 years ago, had once worked in a soap factory in Antipolo. She had taught Maria the basic chemistry of saponification during long evenings when they watched their children play in the narrow alleys between their homes. Coconut oil, caustic soda, and patience, Rosa had said, demonstrating with imaginary ingredients. The secret is in the timing and the temperature. Too fast, and you get a mess. Too slow, and nothing happens. At all. Maria touched the rosary hanging around her neck, a final gift from Rosa, and whispered a prayer that felt more like a conversation with her departed friend. The morning workers had already disappeared inside the building, and the guard at the gate was settling into his plastic chair with a cup of coffee and a tabloid newspaper. She could return tomorrow, or next week, or never. She could continue collecting bottles and cans, selling sachets of shampoo and packets of instant coffee, surviving one day at a time until her children were old enough to lift the burden of responsibility from her shoulders. Instead, she walked to the gate. The security guard looked up from his newspaper with the polite disinterest of someone accustomed to turning away job seekers. His uniform was pressed and clean, his shoes polished to a shine that reflected the morning sun. Maria suddenly became aware of her own appearance. The faded dress that had once belonged to her sister, the plastic slippers held together with electrical tape, the smell of river mud and honest poverty that clung to her like a second skin. "Good morning, sir," she said, using the respectful tone she had perfected through years of asking for extensions on bills and understanding from landlords. "I saw the sign about work. I have experience with soap making." The guard studied her, with the kind of look she had grown accustomed to receiving, a mixture of sympathy and skepticism that spoke to the distance between intention and possibility. "What kind of experience?" he asked, not unkindly.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Maria thought of Rosa's lessons, of the small batches of laundry soap she had made for her own family, of the chemistry textbook she had found in a box of donations and studied by candlelight when the electricity was cut off. "Traditional methods," she said carefully. "Coconut oil base, proper saponification process. I understand the importance of temperature control and timing." The guard's expression shifted slightly, suggesting that her answer had contained something unexpected. He reached for a clipboard hanging inside his booth and wrote down her name and address in careful block letters. "Report to the main office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning," he said. "Ask for Tommy Valdez, the foreman. He'll be the one to test your knowledge." Maria thanked him with the kind of deep gratitude that comes from years of having small kindnesses, treated as rare gifts. She walked home along the river with a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the empty plastic bag slung over her shoulder. Tomorrow she would face whatever test Tommy Valdez might devise. Tonight, she would review everything Rosa had taught her and pray that friendship could bridge the gap between desperate hope and actual qualification. The narrow streets of Barangay San Isidro welcomed her back with their familiar symphony of sounds. Children playing patintero in the spaces between parked jeepneys, vendors calling out their wares from bicycle carts, neighbors sharing gossip, and rice across the low walls that separated their modest homes. Maria's own house stood at the end of a dead-end alley, its concrete block walls painted the same cheerful yellow that seemed to appear on half the structures in the barangay. She found her 3 children where she had left them, Elena hunched over a worn textbook at the small table that served as both dining surface and homework desk, while 14-year-old twins Miguel and Sofia worked together to repair a neighbor's broken radio. The sight of them always filled her with a complex mixture of pride and panic. They were brilliant, all 3 of them, with Rosa's quick wit and Roberto's steady hands. Elena dreamed of becoming a teacher. Miguel showed remarkable skill with electronics, and Sofia had inherited Maria's practical wisdom along with an artist's eye for beauty and design. But brilliance without opportunity was just another form of suffering, and Maria lived in constant fear that poverty would steal their futures the way it had stolen her own education and Roberto's life. "Mama." Elena looked up from her textbook with the bright smile that reminded Maria so strongly of Roberto that it sometimes took her breath away. "How was your morning? Did you find many bottles?" Maria sat down beside her daughter and touched her face with gentle fingers. "I found something better," she said. "I found a possibility." She told them about the sign, about the guard's unexpected kindness, about tomorrow's appointment with Tommy Valdez. She watched their faces transform as hope took root. The same dangerous, necessary hope that had carried their family through Roberto's death and the floods and the countless small disasters that comprised daily life in the margins of a growing city. "Rosa always said you were the smartest person she knew," Sofia said quietly. "She said you could learn anything if you had the chance to try." Miguel looked up from the radio's exposed circuitry with oil-stained fingers and serious eyes. "If you get this job, Mama, will things be different for us?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with significance and the weight of dreams too large for their small house. Maria thought of the factory's clean walls and modern equipment, of regular wages and health insurance, and the kind of stability that would allow her children to think beyond tomorrow's rice. Yes, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Things will be different. That evening, she prepared for the interview with the same meticulous care she had once devoted to preparing for her wedding. She hand-washed her best dress and hung it carefully to dry, polished her only pair of leather shoes until they gleamed, and practiced answers to questions she imagined Tommy Valdez might ask. Elena helped her review the chemistry principles from the donated textbook, while Miguel and Sofia offered encouragement and advice that revealed wisdom far beyond their 14 years. Remember, Sofia said as Maria braided her hair into a neat bun. Rosa always said that soap making is about transformation, taking something ordinary and making it useful. Maria smiled at her daughter's reflection in the small mirror above their wash basin. Just like people, she said. The night passed slowly, filled with prayers and nervous energy, and the kind of sleepless anticipation that comes before moments that might change everything. Maria lay in the narrow bed she shared with Elena, listening to the sounds of the barangay, settling into sleep, televisions growing quiet, conversations ending, the distant hum of traffic from the main road that connected their small world to the larger possibilities of Metro Manila. When dawn broke over the corrugated roofs and satellite dishes of Barangay San Isidro, Maria was already awake, already dressed, already walking toward whatever future waited for her at the gates of Reyes Soap Manufacturing. The morning air carried the promise of another hot day, but also something else, the faint scent of coconut oil and lye that spoke of transformation, of ordinary materials becoming something clean and useful and new. As she approached the factory gates for the second time, Maria thought of Rosa's hands guiding hers through the delicate process of mixing oils and alkali, of Roberto's gentle voice encouraging her to dream beyond their circumstances, of her 3 children sleeping peacefully because they trusted her to find a way forward. She touched the rosary around her neck one more time and whispered a prayer that was part gratitude, part supplication, and entirely honest. Tomorrow, she would face Tommy Valdez and whatever test he had prepared. Today, she would walk through those gates as someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The difference, she realized, was hope itself, dangerous, necessary, and completely transformative. The guard recognized her and nodded toward the main office with something that might have been encouragement. Maria squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked forward into the unknown future that waited beyond the chain-link fence and locked doors of her old life. Part 2. The test and acceptance. Tommy Valdez emerged from the factory office at precisely 8 o'clock, his clipboard in hand, and the bearing of a man who had earned his position through decades of hard work rather than inherited privilege. His face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent years breathing the humid air of manufacturing floors, and his handshake carried the firm grip of calloused palms that still remembered the weight of honest labor. Maria Santos, he said, reading from the paper the security guard had given him. You claim experience with soap making. In what capacity? The question hung between them in the morning air, heavy with the industrial sounds of machinery warming. Up for another day of production. Maria felt the weight of her children's futures pressing against her shoulders like a physical force, but she met Tommy's gaze with the steady confidence she had learned from watching Roberto negotiate with construction. Foreman, traditional coconut oil soap, sir. Cold process and hot process methods. I understand the saponification values of different oils and the importance of proper lye calculations. The words came out more smoothly than she had expected, carrying the authority of knowledge gained through necessity and refined through Rosa's patient teaching. Tommy's eyebrows lifted slightly, a gesture that suggested surprise mixed with professional skepticism. Anyone can memorize terminology from a textbook. Show me you understand the chemistry. He led her through the factory entrance into a world that seemed to exist in a different universe from the narrow streets of Barangay San Isidro. The main production floor stretched out before them like a cathedral of modern industry, with stainless steel vats arranged in precise rows and workers, moving with the choreographed efficiency of people who knew their roles perfectly. The air thrummed with the sound of mixing equipment and carried the clean, almost medicinal scent of soap in various stages of production. Maria tried not to stare as Tommy guided her past workers operating machinery that looked like something from a science fiction film. These were not the wooden paddles and plastic buckets she had imagined, but sophisticated equipment that could process hundreds of kilos of raw materials in the time it would take her to make a single batch by hand. "This is our main production line," Tommy explained, his voice carrying over the mechanical symphony around them. "We process approximately 2,000 kilos of coconut oil daily, along with palm kernel oil, caustic soda, and various additives depending on the product specifications." They stopped at a smaller station where a young woman was carefully measuring ingredients into what appeared to be a testing vat. The setup looked more familiar to Maria, closer in scale to Rose's improvised lessons, though infinitely more precise and professional. "Explain to me," Tommy said, handing her a clipboard with formulation sheets. "What happens when you add sodium hydroxide to coconut oil at different temperatures?" Maria studied the papers, recognizing the chemical formulas. Despite their formal presentation, the numbers and percentages told a story she had learned to read through trial and error, through batches that failed and succeeded in equal measure during those long evenings when Rosa had shared her factory knowledge with someone desperate enough to listen. "At room temperature, the reaction is slow and incomplete," she began, her voice gaining strength as the familiar concepts took shape in words. "You get partial saponification, but the soap will be soft and may separate. Heat accelerates the process, but too much heat too quickly causes the mixture to seize up. The ideal range is between 40 and 60 degrees Celsius, depending on the oil blend and the desired texture of the final product." Tommy nodded, making notes on his own clipboard. "What about superfatting? Leaving excess oils unsaponified to create a gentler product, usually between 3 and 8%, depending on the intended use. Higher for sensitive skin formulations. Lower for laundry soap where you want maximum cleaning power." The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from trace recognition to troubleshooting common problems. Maria found herself drawing not only on Rose's lessons but on her own experiences with the small batches she had made for her family, the experiments that had sometimes failed spectacularly but had taught her to recognize the subtle changes in texture and smell that indicated success or disaster. "One final test," Tommy said, leading her to the small mixing station. "Make me a sample batch. 1 kilo coconut oil, appropriate lye solution, basic formulation. Show me your technique." Maria's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the measuring equipment, but the familiar ritual of soap making calmed her nerves. She had performed these same motions hundreds of times, though never with such precise tools or under such scrutiny. The coconut oil melted smoothly in the stainless steel pot, its sweet aroma rising like a prayer of gratitude for the abundance she had never been able to take for granted. The lye solution required careful attention. She measured the caustic soda with the respect born of knowing its power to burn skin and ruin batches. The distilled water accepted the sodium hydroxide with the violent reaction she had learned to expect, generating heat and fumes that spoke to the chemical transformation taking place. She waited for the solution to cool to the proper temperature, testing it with a thermometer rather than the back of her hand as she had learned to do at home. When both components reached the ideal temperature range, Maria began the delicate process of combining them. She poured the lye solution in a thin stream while stirring constantly, watching for the moment when the mixture would begin to thicken and take on the appearance that Rosa had always called thin mayonnaise. Tommy watched without comment as she worked, his experienced eyes noting details she might not have realized were being evaluated. Her posture spoke of confidence earned through practice, her timing showed understanding of the chemical processes involved, and her attention to safety protocols demonstrated the kind of careful thinking that translated into consistent results. On a production scale, the mixture reached trace exactly when Maria expected it to, thickening to the proper consistency without the lumps or separation that marked amateur work. She poured it into the small mold Tommy provided and set it aside to saponify, knowing that the real test would come in 24 hours when the chemical reaction completed itself. "Where did you learn all this?" Tommy asked as they watched the pale mixture settle into its container. Maria thought of Rose's hands guiding hers, of textbooks read by candlelight, of batches made in plastic containers with equipment improvised From kitchen supplies. From a friend who worked in Antipolo. She taught me that soap making is chemistry, not magic. Respect the process, understand the science, and the results will be consistent. Tommy made final notes on his clipboard, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Report to work tomorrow morning at 6. Standard probationary period is 3 months. You'll start in quality control, testing finished products and monitoring. Batch consistency. If you prove reliable, we'll discuss moving you to production. The words hit Maria like a physical force, stealing her breath and making her legs suddenly unsteady. She gripped the edge of the stainless steel counter to keep from swaying, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. A job. A real job with regular hours and steady pay and the kind of stability she had not experienced since Roberto's death. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotions she did not trust herself to express fully. "You won't regret this decision." Tommy's stern expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of the man beneath the supervisor's professional mask. "I hope not. Report to Elena Mercado in quality control tomorrow. She'll explain your duties and the safety protocols. Standard. Wage is 400 pesos per day during probation, with health insurance after 90 days. 400 pesos. More than Maria typically earned in a week of selling items from her sari-sari store, collecting recyclables, and taking in laundry. Enough to buy real food instead of just rice and dried fish. Enough to pay for Elena's school supplies without choosing between textbooks and electricity. Enough to imagine a future where her children might attend college instead of dropping out to work in the same factories and shops that had defined the limits of her own possibilities. She walked home through the familiar streets of Barangay San Isidro in a daze of gratitude and disbelief, seeing everything as if for the first time. The narrow alleys seemed less confining, the modest houses less like prison cells and more like stepping stones toward something better. Children playing in the streets looked up at her with curious eyes, perhaps sensing some change in her bearing that spoke of transformation beginning to take root. Elena, Miguel, and Sofia were waiting for her when she reached their small yellow house, their faces bright with anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. They gathered around her at the small table where Elena had been studying, their questions tumbling over each other in the way that always reminded Maria of how young they still were despite the adult responsibilities they had learned to shoulder. "Did you get the job, Mama?" Elena asked, her textbook forgotten in the excitement of the moment. What was it like inside the factory? Miguel wanted to know, his hands still stained with motor oil from his morning spent repairing electronics. For neighbors who paid in small coins and leftover rice. Sofia simply washed her mother's face with the artist's eye that could read emotions like other people read newspapers. "Something good happened," she said with quiet certainty. "You look different." Maria gathered her 3 children in the embrace that had become their family's greatest comfort since Roberto's death, feeling their warmth and trust settle around her like armor against the uncertainties that still lay ahead. Tomorrow she would put on her best dress again and walk through the factory gates as an employee rather than a desperate applicant. Tomorrow she would begin learning the industrial processes that would transform her kitchen table knowledge into professional expertise. But tonight, she would hold her children and tell them about the future that had suddenly become possible, about the dreams that might finally have space to grow beyond the narrow confines of survival and into the broader territory of hope. Part 3. A new life takes shape. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30, but Maria had been awake for 20 minutes already, her body buzzing with the nervous energy of someone about to begin a completely new chapter of her life. She moved quietly through their small house, not wanting to wake her children until absolutely necessary, gathering her lunch of rice and fried bangus that Sofia had insisted on preparing the night before. The streets of Barangay San Isidro were still mostly empty at this hour, inhabited only by early commuters heading to factory shifts and street vendors setting up their breakfast stalls. Maria walked the familiar route to the main road where she would catch the jeepney to Marikina, but everything felt different now. The same cracked pavement and painted walls that had once seemed like the boundaries of her world now looked like the starting point of a journey towards something larger and more hopeful. The jeepney ride passed in a blur of morning conversations. and urban landscapes slowly awakening to another day of commerce and possibility. Maria clutched her small bag containing her lunch and Rose's rosary, drawing comfort from the smooth beads that carried the prayers and memories of her dearest friend. By the time she reached the factory gates, the sun was beginning to rise over the industrial district, painting the corrugated roofs and concrete walls in shades of gold that spoke of new beginnings. Elena Mercado greeted her at the quality control station with the kind of professional warmth that immediately put Maria at ease. She was a woman in her mid-30s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that spoke of years spent handling the delicate instruments used to test soap consistency, pH levels, and chemical composition. First-day nerves are normal, Elena said with a smile that reached her eyes. I've been working here for 8 years, and I still remember how overwhelming everything seemed at first. But Tommy says you have real knowledge, not just book learning. That's rare. The quality control laboratory occupied a clean, well-lit corner of the factory floor, equipped with testing equipment that looked impossibly sophisticated to someone accustomed to evaluating soap quality by touch and smell alone. Elena began Maria's orientation by explaining the various instruments and their functions, speaking in the patient tone of someone who genuinely enjoyed teaching and took pride in her expertise. This is our pH meter, she explained, demonstrating the calibration process on a sample from the morning's first batch. Ideal range for body soap is between 9 and 10. Too high, and it irritates sensitive skin. Too low, and it doesn't clean effectively. Maria watched intently as Elena worked, noting the precise movements and careful attention to detail that characterized professional-level quality control. The process reminded her of Rose's teaching methods, practical knowledge transmitted through demonstration and repetition until understanding became instinct. Your job will be to test every 10th batch from each production line, Elena continued, showing Maria the logbook where results were recorded in neat columns that tracked the factory's output with mathematical precision. We maintain strict standards because our reputation depends on consistency. A single bad batch can cost us a major client. The morning passed quickly as Maria learned to operate the testing equipment and interpret the results. Her hands, accustomed to the texture and behavior of soap from years of making small batches, adapted quickly to the more precise measurements required in a commercial setting. She found herself translating the numerical readings back into the sensory knowledge Rosa had taught her, creating bridges between theoretical chemistry and practical experience. During the lunch break, Maria sat in the small employee cafeteria with Elena and several other workers, listening to conversations about production quotas, equipment maintenance, and the small dramas that comprise daily life in any workplace. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere beyond the narrow confines of her neighborhood, part of a larger community united by shared purpose and mutual respect. "How long have you worked in soap making?" asked Carmen, a woman about Maria's age who operated one of the main production lines with the fluid expertise of long practice. "My friend Rosa taught me the basics before she died," Maria replied, choosing her words carefully. She had learned during Roberto's construction work that admitting to poverty could change how people treated you, shifting respect into pity and creating distances that had nothing to do with competence or character. "Rosa Delgado?" Elena looked up from her rice with sudden interest. "Short woman, very serious about chemistry? Worked at the Antipolo plant before it closed?" Maria nodded, surprised by the recognition. "You knew her?" "Not personally, but her reputation traveled. She was famous for never having a failed batch in 6 years of production work. They say she could tell the quality of soap just by the sound it made during mixing." Pride swelled in Maria's chest at this unexpected validation of her friend's expertise. Rosa had always been modest about her knowledge, presenting it as simple factory training rather than the sophisticated understanding of industrial chemistry that Elena's words revealed. Learning that Rosa's skills had been recognized and respected by professionals made Maria feel more confident about her own abilities, as if she carried some portion of that respected legacy forward into her new position. The afternoon brought more training as Elena guided Maria through the complete testing protocol for a batch of antibacterial soap destined for a hotel chain. The process required multiple measurements and careful documentation, but Maria found herself anticipating the steps before Elena explained them, her intuition sharpened by Rose's teaching connecting with the formal procedures. "You have good instincts," Elena observed as Maria completed her first independent test, comparing the results to the acceptable range and noting any variations that might require adjustment. "Tommy was right about your knowledge being genuine. Some people can memorize procedures, but understanding the chemistry is different." As the day ended and Maria prepared to return home, she felt a satisfaction deeper than mere relief at having survived her first day. The work challenged her mind in ways she had forgotten were possible, requiring the kind of focused attention and problem-solving that had been missing from her life since Roberto's death forced her into survival mode. The jeepney ride home gave her time to process the events of the day and plan how to share her experiences with Elena, Miguel, and Sofia. They would want to hear every detail, would ask questions that would help her organize her own thoughts about this new chapter they were all entering together. She found them waiting at the small table as she had expected, their faces bright with curiosity and anticipation. Elena had prepared dinner using ingredients from their small pantry, while Miguel had repaired 3 more radios that neighbors had brought by throughout the day. Sofia had spent the afternoon sketching, her notebook filled with drawings of flowers and faces that captured beauty in the everyday scenes of their neighborhood. "Tell us everything," Elena demanded as soon as Maria sat down, her textbooks pushed aside to make room for their evening meal. Maria described the testing equipment and the production lines, the complexity of the chemical processes, and the pride that all the workers took in creating products that met exacting standards. She explained how Rose's teaching had prepared her more thoroughly than she had realized, how knowledge gained around their small table translated directly into professional competence. "Will you learn to operate the big machines?" Miguel asked, his fascination with mechanical processes evident in the way his eyes lit up as Maria described the mixing equipment and automated packaging lines. "Maybe eventually," Maria replied, though she was already imagining the possibilities that steady employment might create. "For now, I'm learning quality control, making sure every batch meets the standards that keep customers satisfied." Sofia sketched as she listened, her pencil capturing the expressions on her mother's face as she talked about her new work. "You look happy, Mama. Different than before." The observation struck Maria with its simple accuracy. She did feel different, not just relieved or grateful, but genuinely excited about going to work tomorrow and learning more about the industrial processes that turn simple ingredients into products used by thousands of people across Metro Manila. For the first time in years, she was looking forward rather than just enduring. That evening, after the children had completed their homework and settled into sleep, Maria sat by the small window that looked out over their neighborhood and allowed herself to dream about the future in concrete terms rather than desperate hopes. Regular income meant Elena could continue her education without the constant worry about school fees. Miguel's talent with electronics might lead to technical training that could transform his informal skills into a professional career. Sofia's artistic abilities could be nurtured with proper supplies and perhaps even formal instruction. The factory job was more than employment. It was the foundation for building the kind of life Roberto had dreamed of providing for their family. As Maria fell asleep to the familiar sounds of their neighborhood settling into night, she carried with her the satisfaction of work well done and the anticipation of challenges that would stretch her abilities rather than merely test her endurance. Part 4. Secrets in the Soap. 3 weeks into her new position, Maria had established a rhythm that felt both natural and revolutionary. She arrived at the factory before dawn, tested the overnight batches with growing confidence, and spent her lunch breaks in the employee cafeteria listening to conversations that expanded her understanding of industrial soap production beyond Rose's foundational teachings. The work satisfied her in ways she had not expected. Each batch test required careful attention and scientific precision, but also drew on the intuitive knowledge she had developed through years of making soap by hand. She found herself noticing subtle variations in texture and aroma that the instruments sometimes missed, catching potential problems before they developed into costly failures. Elena Mercado had become more than a supervisor. She was a mentor who seemed genuinely pleased by Maria's rapid mastery of quality control procedures. During slower moments, she shared stories about the factory's history and the personalities that shaped its daily operations, painting a picture of Reyes Soap Manufacturing as a family business that had grown into one of Metro Manila's most respected producers of personal care products. Carlos Reyes built this place from nothing. Elena explained one morning as they calibrated the pH meters for the day's testing. His father was a coconut farmer in Bataan who lost everything during the war. Carlos worked construction to put himself through chemistry courses, then started making soap in his garage 20 years ago. Maria listened with the kind of attention she reserved for information that might prove important later. Success stories fascinated her because they suggested that dramatic change was possible, that people could transform their circumstances through determination and hard work rather than luck or inherited advantages. "What kind of man is he?" she asked, realizing that despite working in his factory for weeks, she had never actually seen Carlos Reyes in person. Elena's expression grew thoughtful, as if the question required careful consideration. "Demanding, but fair. He knows every aspect of the business because he learned it himself rather than inheriting it. Some people say he's changed since his wife died, become more focused on work and less interested in the social aspects of running a business." The mention of widowhood created an unexpected connection in Maria's mind. She knew the weight of loss, the way grief could reshape a person's priorities and relationships. She found herself wondering what kind of woman Carlos Reyes had loved, what kind of partnership had sustained him through the years of building his business from garage startup to industrial success. Later that morning, as Maria was testing a batch of moisturizing soap that would be packaged for export to Singapore, she noticed something unusual in the consistency measurements. The numbers fell within acceptable ranges, but her hands detected a slight grittiness that suggested incomplete mixing during the saponification process. She ran the test twice more, documenting her findings carefully before approaching Elena with her concerns. The measurements were technically acceptable, but Maria's instincts told her the soap would not meet the quality standards that kept customers returning month after month. "The pH is fine and the moisture content is within range," she explained to Elena, showing her the test results. "But there's something in the texture that doesn't feel right. It might be a temperature issue during mixing or possibly inconsistent." Stirring speed. Elena examined the soap sample with her own experienced hands, frowning as she detected the same subtle imperfection that Maria had noticed. "You're right. It's barely perceptible, but it's there. Good catch. This would have caused customer complaints if we had shipped it." They traced the problem back to production line 3, where a new employee had been struggling with the timing of ingredient additions. The batch was rejected and recycled, preventing what could have been a significant quality control failure. Carlos Reyes himself came down to the production floor to investigate the issue, marking Maria's first glimpse of the man whose business had become her family's pathway to stability. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 45, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested a mind constantly processing information and solving problems. His clothes were expensive but practical, well-tailored pants and a button-down shirt that could transition seamlessly from office meetings to factory floor inspections. When he shook hands with Elena and Maria, his grip conveyed the same callous strength that Tommy Valdez possessed, suggesting that success had not separated him from the physical realities of soap production. "Good work catching this problem," he said to Maria, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being listened to but lacking any trace of condescension. "Elena tells me you detected the texture issue before it showed up in our standard measurements. My friend Rosa taught me to trust what my hands tell me as much as what the instruments say," Maria replied, choosing her words carefully. She had learned that successful people appreciated directness but expected it to be delivered with appropriate respect. Carlos studied her face with the kind of attention that suggested he was filing away information for future reference. "Rosa Delgado? I heard about her work at the Antipolo plant. If she trained you, you learned from one of the best." The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but Maria sensed that something significant had occurred beyond a simple discussion of quality control procedures. Carlos Reyes had noticed her competence and connected it to Rosa's respected legacy, creating a professional reputation that extended beyond her 3 weeks of employment. Over the following days, Maria found herself assigned to increasingly complex testing procedures, including quality control for specialty batches destined for high-end hotels and export markets. Elena explained that these assignments reflected growing confidence in her abilities, but also the factory's expansion into more demanding market segments that required absolute consistency in product quality. The work challenged her technical skills while providing insights into the business strategies that drove successful manufacturing operations. She learned about profit margins and customer relationships, about the delicate balance between cost control and quality maintenance that determined whether a company thrived or merely survived in competitive markets. During her lunch breaks, Maria began observing the factory's operations with new understanding. She watched the coordination required to transform raw materials into finished products, noting the way experienced workers anticipated problems and adjusted their techniques to maintain consistent output. The complexity reminded her of the neighborhood networks that sustained daily life in Barangay San Isidro, intricate systems of mutual dependence that functioned smoothly when everyone understood their role and responsibilities. One afternoon, while testing a batch of premium coconut oil soap that would carry the factory's most expensive label, Maria discovered something unexpected embedded in the production notes. The formulation included ingredients and processes that seemed familiar, though she could not immediately identify why the combination triggered recognition. She studied the chemical specifications more carefully, noting the precise ratios of coconut oil to palm kernel oil, the specific temperature ranges for mixing, and the addition of natural glycerin at a particular stage of saponification. The formulation was sophisticated and expensive, but something about it reminded her of Rosa's more advanced experiments during their evening lessons. That night, Maria asked Elena about the premium soap line, curious about its development and market positioning. Elena's response revealed information that connected directly to the recognition Maria had experienced while reading the production notes. That's Carlos's signature formulation, Elena explained as they prepared to leave work for the day. He developed it himself about 5 years ago, based on traditional methods he learned from soap makers in different provinces. It's our most profitable product because the quality justifies premium pricing. The description matched Rosa's stories about traditional soap-making techniques that had been passed down through generations of Filipino craftsmen, methods that emphasized natural ingredients and careful attention to the chemical processes that created superior cleaning and moisturizing properties. Maria realized that Carlos Reyes had rediscovered and commercialized the same traditional knowledge that Rosa had shared during their informal lessons around the small table in Barangay San Isidro. The recognition created a complex mixture of pride and sadness, pride that Rosa's knowledge had proven commercially valuable, and sadness that her friend had died before seeing traditional Filipino soap-making techniques gain recognition in modern markets. Maria found herself wondering whether Rosa would have been pleased to know that her informal teaching had prepared someone to work professionally with the advanced formulations that honored their shared cultural heritage. As she traveled home that evening, Maria carried with her a deeper understanding of the connections between traditional knowledge and modern success, between the informal economy that sustained families like hers and the formal business structures that created opportunities for advancement. The factory job was providing more than income. It was revealing the hidden relationships that linked her community's survival strategies to the broader economic systems that shaped their region's development. Elena, Miguel, and Sofia noticed the thoughtful mood that had settled over their mother during dinner, recognizing the expression that appeared when she was processing new information and considering its implications for their family's future. Something important happened today, Sofia observed with her usual perceptiveness. Maria smiled at her daughter's ability to read emotions like other people read text messages. I'm learning that the knowledge Rosa shared with us is more valuable than we realized. The work I'm doing at the factory connects to traditions that go back generations, methods that are now being used to create premium products for international markets. The conversation that followed helped Maria organize her own thoughts about the significance of traditional knowledge in modern contexts, about the ways that informal learning could translate into professional expertise when opportunities arose. As her children asked questions and offered their own insights, she felt grateful for the intellectual curiosity that Roberto and Rosa had fostered in their small house, preparing all of them to recognize and capitalize on possibilities that others might overlook. Part 5. Recognition and growing tensions. The promotion came without fanfare on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by Tommy Valdez with the matter-of-fact efficiency that characterized all his professional interactions. Maria had been testing a particularly challenging batch of antibacterial soap when he approached her station with clipboard in hand and an expression that revealed nothing of his intentions. "Effective immediately, you'll be cross-training on production line 2, he announced, making notes in his precise handwriting. "Elena will continue supervising your quality control work, but Carlos wants you to understand the manufacturing process from start to finish." The news hit Maria like a sudden change in weather, unexpected but immediately recognizable as significant. Cross-training meant increased responsibility and, eventually, higher wages. More importantly, it represented recognition that her competence extended beyond the testing procedures she had mastered during her first month of employment. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say, though her voice carried more emotion than she had intended to reveal. "I won't disappoint you." Tommy's stern expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of satisfaction that suggested he took personal pride in identifying and developing talent. "You've earned this opportunity through consistent performance and attention to detail. Learn everything you can. Carlos is expanding operations, and he'll need supervisors who understand both quality control and production." The implications of his words extended far beyond immediate job duties. Supervisor positions meant salaries that could transform her family's circumstances from survival to genuine security, providing Elena with university opportunities and giving Miguel and Sofia access to the kind of educational resources that could support their talents and ambitions. Maria spent the remainder of that day learning the intricate choreography of industrial soap production under the guidance of Carmen Santos, the experienced line operator who had become a friend during their lunch break conversations. The process required precise timing and careful attention to safety protocols, but the fundamental chemistry remained familiar from Rose's teaching and her own experiments with small batches. "The key is consistency," Carmen explained as they monitored the massive mixing vats that could process 500 kilos of coconut oil at a time. "Every batch must be identical to maintain product quality, but the equipment has personality quirks that you learn to anticipate and compensate for." Maria watched intently as Carmen demonstrated the subtle adjustments that kept the production line running smoothly. Slightly longer mixing times when the ambient humidity was high, temperature modifications based on the quality of incoming raw materials, timing changes that accommodated the natural variations that occurred even in carefully controlled industrial processes. The work demanded physical stamina as well as technical knowledge. Production shifts lasted 8 hours with minimal breaks, requiring constant attention to safety procedures and quality checkpoints. But Maria found herself energized rather than exhausted by the challenges, drawn to the problem-solving aspects of maintaining consistent output despite the countless variables that could affect batch quality. During her lunch break, she called Elena's school to share the news of her promotion, knowing that her daughter would understand the significance better than anyone. Elena's excited response carried across the scratchy connection with infectious enthusiasm, reminding Maria of Roberto's ability to find joy in small victories and treat setbacks as temporary obstacles rather than permanent defeats. "Mama, this is wonderful. Miguel and Sofia will be so proud when they hear. Maybe now we can afford the advanced science textbooks I need for next semester." The practical implications of steady advancement settled around Maria like a comfortable weight. Advanced textbooks represented possibilities she had not dared to imagine just 2 months earlier, when her primary concern had been finding enough recyclable materials to buy rice for dinner. The transformation felt surreal but undeniably real, measured in peso coins that accumulated with mathematical reliability rather than the unpredictable charity that had characterized their previous existence. That evening, as she shared the day's developments with her 3 children around their small table, Maria noticed changes in their expressions that reflected growing confidence in their family's future. Elena discussed her academic plans with the assumption that resources would be available to support them. Miguel mentioned technical training programs he had researched but never seriously considered affordable. Sofia showed her latest sketches with the quiet pride of someone who was beginning to believe that artistic talent might lead to opportunities rather than remaining a private pleasure. The conversation revealed how profoundly their circumstances had shifted in just 6 weeks of steady employment. Not only had their basic needs been secured, but they were beginning to imagine possibilities that extended beyond mere survival into the territory of genuine advancement and personal fulfillment. However, success at the factory had begun to attract attention in Barangay San Isidro that was not entirely positive. Neighbors who had previously treated Maria with the casual sympathy reserved for fellow sufferers now regarded her with a mixture of respect and suspicion that spoke to the complex dynamics of poverty and advancement in closely knit communities. Mrs. Gonzalez, who operated the largest sari-sari store in their neighborhood, had begun making comments about Maria's improved financial situation with the kind of pointed observations that suggested disapproval disguised as concern. "It's good that you found steady work," she said one evening when Maria stopped by to purchase school supplies for Elena. "I hope you remember the people who helped you when times were difficult." The implication hung in the air like humidity before a storm, that success created obligations, that advancement should be shared rather than hoarded, that rising above community circumstances carried moral responsibilities that could be enforced through social pressure. Maria understood the dynamics from years of observing how neighborhood networks functioned during crises and celebrations alike. Mutual aid systems that sustained families through emergencies operated on principles of reciprocity that assumed temporary advantage would be balanced by future need. Her steady employment disrupted those assumptions by creating the possibility of permanent rather than cyclical improvement. More concerning were the comments from Father Antonio Cruz during Sunday Mass, sermons that seemed increasingly focused on the dangers of material ambition and the importance of accepting God's plan for one's station in life. His words carried the authority of religious doctrine, but Maria detected undertones that felt more personal than theological. "Beware the temptation to rise above your calling," he proclaimed from the pulpit, his gaze seeming to linger on Maria and her children, in their usual pew near the back of the small church. True contentment comes from accepting the circumstances God has provided, not from striving after worldly success. The message troubled Maria because it challenged the very aspirations that made her factory work meaningful beyond mere income generation. She had always believed that God helped those who helped themselves, that using her abilities to improve her family's circumstances represented gratitude rather than greed. Father Cruz's implications suggested a different interpretation, that ambition itself might be sinful, that seeking advancement betrayed a lack of faith in divine providence. After Mass, several neighbors approached Maria with conversation that seemed designed to probe her changing attitudes and circumstances. The questions felt less like friendly interest and more like investigation, as if her success needed to be evaluated and potentially constrained by community judgment. "Your children seem different lately," observed Mrs. Reyes, an elderly woman whose opinions carried considerable weight in neighborhood discussions. "More confident, maybe too confident for their age." The comment stung because it contained enough truth to feel threatening. Elena, Miguel, and Sofia did carry themselves differently now, with the posture of young people who believed their futures held genuine possibilities rather than predetermined limitations. Maria had celebrated that change as evidence of hope taking root, but Mrs. Reyes's words suggested that others might interpret confidence as arrogance. Walking home from church, Maria found herself caught between gratitude for her family's improved circumstances and anxiety about the social complications that success had introduced. The factory job had solved their immediate financial problems, but created new challenges related to community acceptance and social positioning that she had not anticipated. Elena noticed her mother's thoughtful mood during their Sunday dinner of chicken adobo, a luxury they could now afford regularly rather than reserving for special occasions. "People are talking about us differently," she observed with the social awareness that came from navigating the complex dynamics of teenage relationships in a small community. Some of it's jealousy, but some of it's genuine concern about whether we're changing in ways that separate us from our neighbors. The conversation that followed helped Maria understand that her children were also processing the social implications of their family's advancement, learning to balance gratitude for new opportunities with loyalty to the community that had sustained them through difficult times. Their insights revealed wisdom beyond their years and suggested that Roberto's emphasis on maintaining dignity regardless of circumstances had prepared them well for the challenges that accompanied success. Part 6. Discovering Hidden Connections. The manila envelope appeared on Maria's workstation without explanation, bearing her name in careful handwriting that she didn't recognize. Inside, she found photocopies of old factory records dating back 15 years, production logs that documented soap formulations and quality control procedures from a period long before her employment at Reyes Soap Manufacturing. Among the yellowed pages, one name appeared repeatedly in the quality control signatures: Rosa Delgado. Her friend's familiar handwriting filled the margins with notes about temperature adjustments and chemical modifications, creating a detailed record of the innovations that had helped establish the factory's reputation for superior products. Maria's hands trembled as she studied Rosa's meticulous documentation, recognizing the same attention to detail that had characterized their evening. Lessons around the small table in Barangay San Isidro. The factory records revealed that Rosa had not simply been another production worker, but a key figure in developing the premium formulations that now generated the company's highest profits. One particular entry caught Maria's attention: a note about experimental batches that combined traditional Filipino soap-making techniques with modern industrial processes. Rosa's handwriting described temperature curves and mixing sequences that Maria recognized from their informal chemistry lessons, methods that Rosa had presented as family recipes rather than commercial innovations. You found the old records. Elena Mercado's voice carried a note of satisfaction as she approached Maria's station during the morning break. Tommy thought you should see them, understand the history behind the formulations you've been testing. Maria looked up from the photocopies with questions forming faster than she could articulate them. Rosa developed these premium recipes? She never told me she had created anything commercial. Elena's expression grew thoughtful, as if she were weighing how much information to share. Rosa was too modest about her contributions. When Carlos inherited the business from his uncle, the company was struggling with inconsistent quality and customer complaints. Rosa's innovations saved the factory from bankruptcy. The revelation transformed Maria's understanding of her friend's legacy and her own position within the company's history. She had thought of herself as someone fortunate enough to benefit from Rosa's informal teaching, but the factory records suggested a deeper connection. She was carrying forward work that Rosa had begun but never completed. Why didn't anyone mention this when I was hired? Maria asked, though she suspected the answer involved the complex dynamics that surrounded credit and recognition in Filipino workplace culture. Carlos prefers to let people prove themselves based on their own abilities rather than inherited connections, Elena replied carefully. But now that you've demonstrated your competence, he thought you should understand the full context of Rosa's contributions. That afternoon, Carlos Reyes himself appeared at Maria's station during the quality control testing of a premium moisturizing soap batch. His presence on the factory floor always created a subtle shift in energy, workers maintaining their focus, while remaining aware of the owner's attention to detail and quality standards. Elena tells me you've been reviewing the historical records, he said without preamble, his direct communication style reflecting the efficiency that characterized successful business leaders. Rosa's innovations form the foundation of our most profitable product lines. Maria set down her testing equipment and gave Carlos her full attention, sensing that this conversation would prove significant beyond its immediate content. She taught me the basic chemistry during evening lessons at my house. I never realized her knowledge came from commercial experience. Carlos studied her face with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was evaluating more than her words. Rosa never received proper credit for her contributions because she died before we could formalize her role in product development. Her innovations were implemented gradually over several years, making it difficult to document her specific contributions. The explanation revealed layers of complexity that Maria had not anticipated. Rosa's modesty about her factory experience now appeared to reflect not just personal humility, but also the reality of workplace dynamics that often failed to recognize contributions from employees who lacked formal education or official titles. I want to show you something, Carlos continued, producing a leather portfolio that contained additional documents. These are Rosa's original formulation notes, written in her own hand. Compare them to the production specifications we currently use. Maria examined the papers with growing amazement, recognizing Rosa's distinctive handwriting in detailed chemical equations and process modifications that had clearly been refined through careful experimentation. The formulations matched the premium recipes that generated the factory's highest profit margins, products that were now distributed throughout Southeast Asia under the Reyes Soap Manufacturing label. The mathematical precision of Rosa's notes revealed a level of expertise that extended far beyond the informal chemistry lessons Maria had received. Her friend had possessed sophisticated understanding of industrial processes, knowledge that she had simplified and adapted for teaching purposes without ever revealing the commercial applications that had made it valuable. Rosa trained you well, Carlos observed as Maria studied the formulation notes. Your ability to detect quality variations before they show up in standard measurements suggests you internalized her approach to soap chemistry rather than just memorizing procedures. The compliment carried weight beyond its immediate meaning, acknowledging not only Maria's competence, but also Rosa's skill as a teacher and innovator. For the first time since beginning work at the factory, Maria felt connected to something larger than her own survival needs. She was continuing work that Rosa had begun, carrying forward innovations that honored traditional Filipino craftsmanship, while meeting modern quality standards. I want to offer you a position in product development, Carlos said, his tone suggesting that the offer represented significant opportunity rather than routine advancement. We're expanding into organic and premium natural products, markets that require the kind of intuitive understanding of traditional methods that Rosa possessed. The proposal struck Maria like physical force, stealing her breath and making her legs suddenly unsteady. Product development positions required advanced technical knowledge and carried responsibilities that could affect the company's reputation and profitability. More importantly, such roles typically came with salaries that could transform her family's circumstances from comfortable survival to genuine prosperity. I would need additional training, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotions she didn't trust herself to express fully. My formal education ended in grade 6. Carlos dismissed her concern with a gesture that suggested formal credentials mattered less than demonstrated ability. Rosa had similar educational background, but she understood soap chemistry better than university-trained chemists I've worked with. Talent and dedication matter more than certificates. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering salary ranges, training programs, and the timeline for transitioning into the new role. Carlos spoke with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions that created opportunities for deserving employees. But Maria detected something else in his manner, a personal investment in honoring Rosa's legacy through supporting someone she had trained. As Carlos prepared to leave, he handed Maria a small box wrapped in brown paper. Rosa left this with instructions that it should be given to someone she had taught, someone who could continue her work. I think she would be pleased to know it's going to you. Inside the box, Maria found Rosa's original chemistry notebook, its pages filled with handwritten formulations, process modifications, and theoretical calculations that revealed the depth of her friend's expertise. The notebook also contained personal notes about teaching methods and observations about the connections between traditional craftsmanship and modern industrial applications. One entry particularly caught Maria's attention, a reflection on the importance of passing knowledge to the next generation, ensuring that innovations would survive beyond their creators. The best teacher, Rosa had written in her careful script, is someone who can help others exceed their own achievements. That evening, Maria shared the day's developments with Elena, Miguel, and Sofia, watching their faces transform as they processed the significance of the product development offer and its implications for their family's future. The salary increase would allow Elena to attend university without financial stress, provide Miguel with access to technical training programs, and give Sofia the art supplies and instruction that could nurture her considerable talent. Rosa was famous, Elena said with wondering pride, studying the chemistry notebook with the reverence appropriate for a treasured family heirloom. And she taught you everything that made her special. Miguel examined Rosa's mathematical calculations with the fascination of someone who appreciated precise problem-solving. Look how she worked out the chemical ratios. These equations are more complex than anything in our high school textbooks. Sofia traced the delicate drawings that Rosa had used to illustrate mixing techniques and equipment modifications. She drew like an engineer, showing exactly how things should work. No wonder her soap was perfect every time. The conversation that followed helped Maria organize her thoughts about accepting the product development position and the responsibilities it would entail. Her children's insights and enthusiasm confirmed her instinct that this opportunity represented not just career advancement, but also a way to honor Rosa's legacy while securing their family's long-term prosperity. However, as news of Maria's promotion spread through Barangay San Isidro, the community reactions grew more complex and, in some cases, more hostile. Neighbors who had previously treated her advancement with mild skepticism now viewed her success as a threat to the social equilibrium that maintained order in their closely knit community. Mrs. Gonzalez's comments became increasingly pointed, delivered with the kind of sharp sweetness that characterized passive-aggressive criticism in Filipino social dynamics. Product development, she repeated when Maria stopped by her store for school supplies. Very impressive for someone with so little formal education. I hope success doesn't make you forget where you come from. The implication hung in the humid evening air that advancement created obligations to share prosperity with the community that had sustained her family during difficult times, and that failure to meet those expectations would result in social isolation and criticism. More troubling were the rumors that began circulating about the circumstances of Maria's employment, suggestions that her rapid advancement reflected favoritism rather than competence. Some neighbors whispered that she had cultivated special relationships with factory management, implications that carried enough sexual innuendo to damage her reputation if they gained wider acceptance. Father Antonio Cruz's sermons grew increasingly specific in their warnings about the spiritual dangers of material ambition, delivered with the kind of righteous authority that could influence community opinion and social standing. His words carried particular weight because they connected material success to moral failing, suggesting that Maria's advancement reflected character defects rather than hard work and ability. "Pride goeth before destruction," he proclaimed from the pulpit, his gaze seeming to linger on Maria and her children with pointed significance. Those who forget their proper station in life invite God's judgment upon themselves and their families. The pressure created by community criticism began affecting Elena, Miguel, and Sofia in ways that concerned Maria more than the direct challenges to her own reputation. Her children found themselves defending their family's success to classmates and neighbors, explaining achievements that should have been celebrated rather than justified. Elena reported conversations with school friends who questioned whether the Santos family was getting above themselves, suggesting that academic ambition represented betrayal of community values rather than appropriate use of available opportunities. The criticism stung because it challenged the very aspirations that made Maria's hard work meaningful beyond immediate financial benefits. Miguel faced similar pressure from neighborhood friends who suggested that his interest in technical training reflected rejection of the informal economy that sustained most families in their community. His ability to repair electronics and his dreams of formal certification were interpreted as criticism of neighbors who lacked such opportunities. Sofia's artistic pursuits attracted particular scrutiny because they seemed most removed from practical survival needs. Neighbors questioned the value of drawing and painting when basic needs required constant attention, suggesting that artistic ambition represented luxury that poor families could not afford. The combined pressure from community criticism and religious disapproval created stress that Maria had not anticipated when she accepted the factory position. Success, she was learning, carried social costs that extended beyond personal circumstances to affect family relationships and community, standing in complex ways. As she prepared for bed after another day of navigating workplace advancement and neighborhood tensions, Maria reflected on the delicate balance required to honor both personal ambition and community belonging. Rosa's notebook lay open on the small table beside her bed, its pages filled with innovations that had transformed a struggling business while honoring traditional Filipino craftsmanship. The parallel seemed significant. Rosa had found ways to bridge traditional knowledge and modern applications, creating value while respecting cultural heritage. Perhaps Maria could find similar balance between personal advancement and community responsibility, using her success to create opportunities for others rather than simply rising above her neighbor's circumstances. Part 7. The catalyst. The morning shift was barely 30 minutes old when the emergency alarm shattered the routine hum of production activities. Maria looked up from her quality control station to see workers evacuating production line 4. In orderly but urgent fashion, their movements reflecting well-practiced safety protocols rather than panic. Tommy Valdez's voice echoed through the factory's public address system with characteristic calm authority. Chemical spill on line 4. All personnel evacuate to designated safety areas. Emergency response team to stations immediately. Maria secured her testing equipment and joined the stream of workers moving toward the factory's main exits, but her attention remained focused on the nature of the emergency unfolding behind them. Chemical spills in soap manufacturing could range from minor inconvenience to serious hazard, depending on the materials involved and the effectiveness of containment procedures. From the designated safety area in the parking lot, workers watched as Carlos Reyes arrived within minutes of the alarm, his presence transforming the emergency response from routine procedure to urgent business crisis. He moved through the gathered employees with focused efficiency, consulting with Tommy and the emergency response coordinators about the extent of the damage and the timeline for resuming operations. Caustic soda leaked from the main storage tank, Elena Mercado explained as she joined Maria among the quality control staff. The containment system activated properly, but will be shut down for at least 6 hours while they clean up and inspect the equipment. The implications of extended downtime rippled through the assembled workers like waves spreading from a stone dropped in still water. 6 hours of lost production meant delayed shipments, disappointed customers, and potential financial losses that could affect everyone's job security in an industry where reliability determined competitive advantage. Maria found herself studying Carlos's face as he coordinated the emergency response, noting the controlled tension that suggested he understood the broader implications of this disruption. Factory owners lived with constant awareness that single incidents could cascade into larger crises, that customers would switch suppliers rather than accept delays or quality compromises. This couldn't have happened at a worse time, Carmen Santos observed, joining their group with information from the production supervisors. We have that major export shipment due tomorrow, 3,000 units going to Singapore. If we miss that deadline, the client will probably find another supplier. The Singapore contract represented significant revenue and, more importantly, credibility in international markets where Reyes Soap Manufacturing was still establishing its reputation. Losing such contracts could set back the company's expansion plans by months or years, affecting not only current profits but also future opportunities for growth. As the morning progressed and the scope of the cleanup became apparent, Carlos made the decision that would test everyone's commitment to the company's success. Rather than simply accepting the production delay and its consequences, he proposed an emergency response that would require extraordinary effort from the entire workforce. We're going to run double shifts for the next 3 days, he announced to the assembled employees. 12-hour days, premium overtime rates, with production lines running around the clock until we catch up on all delayed orders. The proposal generated immediate discussion among the workers, conversations that balanced the appeal of overtime wages against the physical demands of extended shifts and disrupted family schedules. For many employees, the overtime represented financial opportunity that could fund children's education or improve family circumstances. For others, particularly those with young children or elderly dependents, the schedule would create hardships that might outweigh the monetary benefits. Maria found herself facing a personal decision that reflected larger questions about ambition, responsibility, and the price of advancement. The overtime shifts would provide income that could accelerate her family's progress toward genuine prosperity. But they would also mean less time with Elena, Miguel, and Sofia during a period when community pressures were already straining their relationships. I'm volunteering for all the extra shifts, she told Tommy Valdez when he approached the quality control staff for their decisions. My family can manage the schedule changes, and the company needs reliable people during emergencies. Tommy, made notes on his clipboard with an expression that suggested he was not surprised by her commitment. You'll be working with Carlos directly on the priority batches. He's taking personal responsibility for the Singapore shipment, and he wants experience quality control on every step of the process. The opportunity to work closely with Carlos Reyes on critical production represented another unexpected advancement in Maria's trajectory from desperate job applicant to trusted employee. Direct collaboration with the company owner would provide insights into high-level decision-making while demonstrating her reliability under pressure. The emergency response began immediately, with production lines restarting within 6 hours of the initial spill. Maria reported for the extended shift schedule that would define the next 3 days of intensive effort, knowing that her performance during this crisis could determine her long-term prospects within the company. Working directly with Carlos revealed aspects of his leadership style that were not apparent during routine operations. He possessed detailed knowledge of every production process, moving between quality control stations and manufacturing lines with the expertise of someone who had learned the business from ground level rather than inheriting abstract authority. Temperature on line 2 needs adjustment, he observed during a midnight quality check, his attention to detail remaining sharp despite 12 hours of continuous supervision. The humidity changed when the storm front moved through. Compensate with an extra degree on the heating elements. Maria implemented the adjustment and verified its effects through careful testing, noting how Carlos's understanding of environmental variables reflected years of experience with the subtle factors that could affect product consistency. His expertise reminded her of Rose's ability to anticipate problems before they became apparent through standard measurements. The collaboration extended beyond technical matters into discussions of quality philosophy and customer relationships. Carlos explained how individual batches connected to larger business strategies, how consistency in small details created reputation advantages that sustained profitable relationships with demanding clients. Singapore buyers can choose from dozens of suppliers throughout Southeast Asia, he explained as they monitored a particularly critical batch destined for the export shipment. They stay with us because they know every unit will meet exact specifications, that they can stake their own reputation on our reliability. The conversation provided Maria with business education that complemented her technical training, helping her understand how quality control connected to larger economic systems and competitive dynamics. She began to see her testing procedures, not just as factory requirements, but as contributions to relationships that sustained employment for everyone in the building. During the second night of extended operations, an equipment malfunction on production line 3 threatened to derail the entire emergency schedule. The mixing motor developed vibrations that could affect batch consistency, requiring immediate diagnosis and repair to prevent further delays. Carlos and Tommy worked alongside the maintenance crew to identify the problem, their hands-on approach reflecting the urgency of maintaining production momentum. Maria found herself contributing to the troubleshooting process, using her understanding of soap chemistry to help determine whether partially mixed batches could be salvaged or would need to be discarded. The saponification is about 60% complete, she reported after testing samples from the affected batch. If we can restore proper mixing within 20 minutes, the chemical process should proceed normally. Beyond that, we'll get inconsistent texture. Her analysis proved accurate, and the batch was successfully completed after rapid motor repairs. The incident demonstrated how emergency situations could reveal capabilities that routine operations never tested, creating opportunities for employees to prove their value beyond normal job descriptions. By the third day of intensive operations, the factory had not only caught up on delayed orders, but had actually exceeded normal production targets. The emergency response had transformed potential crisis into demonstration of organizational capability, strengthening relationships with customers while building confidence among employees. Carlos addressed the exhausted but satisfied workforce as the emergency schedule concluded, his words carrying genuine appreciation for extraordinary effort. You've proven that this company can overcome any challenge when we work together. The Singapore client is so impressed with our response that they're doubling their monthly orders. The success created immediate benefits in terms of job security and future opportunities, but it also established precedents for how the company would respond to future challenges. Maria realized that her commitment during the emergency had positioned her as someone Carlos could depend on when critical situations demanded exceptional performance. More significantly, the crisis had revealed the depth of her own capabilities and commitment to the company's success. She had not simply performed assigned duties, but had contributed to problem-solving and decision-making at levels that suggested readiness for greater responsibilities. However, the extended work schedule had consequences that extended beyond factory walls into her family's daily routines and community relationships. Elena, Miguel, and Sofia had managed household responsibilities with remarkable maturity, but Maria's absence during critical evening hours had affected their homework, support, and family conversation time. "We understand why you had to work the extra shifts," Elena assured her as they shared a late dinner on the first evening of return to normal schedule. "But we missed having you here to help with problems and answer questions." The comment highlighted tensions between professional advancement and family responsibilities that Maria had not fully anticipated. Success at the factory required commitment that could conflict with her children's needs for guidance and emotional support, creating complex decisions about priorities and time allocation. Miguel had handled most household maintenance tasks during her extended absence, demonstrating mechanical skills and responsibility that impressed Maria but also revealed how quickly her children were maturing in response to changing family circumstances. Sofia had spent the 3 days creating detailed drawings of family memories, artwork that suggested she was processing the changes in their lives through creative expression. Her sketches captured moments of togetherness that seemed more precious, now that work demands were reshaping their daily rhythms. The conversation that followed helped Maria understand that her children supported her professional advancement but also needed reassurance that success would not fundamentally alter their family relationships. They wanted prosperity, but not at the cost of emotional connection and shared experiences that had sustained them through difficult times. As she prepared for sleep after the intense 3-day emergency response, Maria reflected on the delicate balance between professional opportunity and personal relationships. The crisis had demonstrated her capabilities and commitment while revealing the complex decisions that accompanied advancement in competitive industries. Carlos's offer of the product development position now carried additional weight, representing not just career opportunity, but also a test of her ability to manage increasing responsibilities without sacrificing the family relationships that gave success its meaning. Rosa's notebook lay open beside her bed, its pages reminding her that innovation required both technical expertise and wisdom about what truly mattered in life. Part 8. Identity and recognition collide. The formal announcement appeared on the factory bulletin board on a Monday morning that seemed ordinary in every way except for the document that would transform Maria's life permanently. Promotion notice: Maria Santos, Quality Control Specialist, promoted to Product Development Coordinator. Effective immediately. Salary increased to 800 pesos daily, with performance bonuses based on successful product launches. 800 pesos daily. Maria stared at the numbers with disbelief that gradually transformed into profound gratitude. The salary represented more than financial security. It was recognition that her knowledge, inherited from Rosa and refined through dedication, had genuine commercial value in competitive markets. Elena Mercado was the first to congratulate her, approaching with the warm smile that had characterized their working relationship from the beginning. Carlos made the right choice. Rosa would be so proud to see her student achieving recognition for understanding that goes beyond textbook learning. The comment connected Maria's advancement to Rosa's legacy in ways that made the promotion feel like completion of something her friend had begun but never finished. Rosa's innovations were finally receiving recognition through someone she had trained, creating continuity between traditional knowledge and modern success. Tommy Valdez delivered the practical details of the new position with his characteristic efficiency, explaining reporting structures, project timelines, and the laboratory space that would serve as Maria's primary work environment. The product development lab occupied a clean, well-equipped section of the factory that felt more like a university research facility than an industrial workspace. Your first project is developing a premium line of organic soaps using traditional Filipino ingredients, Tommy explained as he showed her the advanced testing equipment and formulation stations. Carlos wants to position the company as a leader in sustainable, culturally authentic products for international markets. The project description aligned perfectly with Maria's knowledge base and personal interests, combining Rose's technical expertise with the traditional methods that had been passed down through generations of Filipino soap makers. For the first time in her career, she would be creating rather than simply maintaining, innovating rather than following established procedures. Carlos himself appeared in the laboratory that afternoon, bringing product samples from competitors and market research that would guide the development process. His presence reflected the importance he placed on this product line and his confidence in Maria's ability to create formulations that would distinguish Reyes Soap Manufacturing in increasingly competitive markets. International buyers are seeking authentic products that tell cultural stories while meeting modern quality standards, he explained as they examined soap samples from Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Our advantage is genuine understanding of traditional Filipino methods combined with industrial-scale production capabilities. Maria studied the competitor products with growing excitement about the possibilities for innovation. The traditional ingredients she had learned to use in Rose's informal lessons, coconut oil from specific regions, native plant extracts, traditional scenting methods, could create competitive advantages that reflected authentic cultural heritage, rather than artificial marketing concepts. I want to start with formulations based on recipes my friend Rosa developed, she said, opening the chemistry notebook that had become her most treasured possession. She understood how to adapt traditional methods for modern production while maintaining the qualities that made them superior to mass-produced alternatives. Carlos examined Rosa's handwritten formulations with the respect appropriate for technical documentation that had proven commercially valuable. These notes show sophistication that rivals university research. If you can scale these methods for industrial production, we'll have products that no competitor can duplicate. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering market positioning, production timelines, and the budget allocation that would support research and development activities. Carlos spoke with the confidence of someone who understood that innovation required investment and patience, that developing superior products justified premium pricing in markets that valued authenticity and quality. As Maria settled into her new role over the following days, she discovered that product development required different skills from quality control work. Instead of maintaining consistency within established parameters, she was creating new formulations that balanced traditional ingredients with modern production requirements, artistic vision with commercial practicality. The laboratory became her second home, equipped with precision instruments that allowed her to test variations in temperature, timing, and ingredient ratios with scientific accuracy. Rose's notebook provided starting points for experimentation, but Maria found herself building on her friend's work with confidence that surprised her. Her first successful formulation combined coconut oil from Laguna Province with natural colorants derived from indigenous plants, creating a moisturizing soap that carried subtle fragrance and visual appeal without artificial additives. The product reflected traditional Filipino soap-making heritage while meeting international standards for purity and consistency. Carlos tested the sample himself, his expression revealing satisfaction that quickly transformed into excitement about commercial possibilities. This is exactly what international buyers are seeking: authentic cultural products that justify premium pricing through superior quality and interesting origin stories. The success generated immediate plans for expanding the organic product line to include variations for different skin types and age groups, creating a family of products that could compete effectively with established international brands while maintaining distinctly Filipino identity. However, as news of Maria's promotion spread beyond the factory walls into Barangay San Isidro, community reactions grew increasingly complex and, in some cases, openly hostile. Neighbors who had initially celebrated her factory employment now viewed her rapid advancement with suspicion that bordered on accusation. Mrs. Gonzalez's comments became pointed enough to constitute verbal attacks, delivered with the kind of righteous indignation that suggested moral authority. Product Development Coordinator, she repeated with obvious skepticism when Maria stopped by her store for household supplies. Very impressive title for someone who used to collect bottles by the river. The implication hung in the evening, air like smoke from cooking fires, that Maria's advancement reflected favoritism or corruption rather than competence, that success of such magnitude was inherently suspicious when achieved by someone from their economic background. More troubling were rumors that began circulating about the circumstances of her employment and promotion, suggestions that she had cultivated inappropriate relationships with factory management to secure advancement. The whispers carried enough sexual innuendo to damage her reputation while remaining vague enough to avoid direct confrontation. Father Antonio Cruz's sermons grew increasingly specific in their warnings about the spiritual dangers of material ambition, delivered with righteous authority that could influence community opinion and social standing. His words connected material success to moral failing, suggesting that rapid advancement reflected character defects rather than hard work and ability. The love of money is the root of all evil, he proclaimed from the pulpit, his gaze seeming to focus on Maria and her children with unmistakable intention. Those who seek worldly success above spiritual salvation invite damnation upon themselves and their families. The religious criticism carried particular weight because it suggested that Maria's professional advancement endangered not only her own soul, but also her children's spiritual welfare. The implication that success constituted sin created pressure that extended beyond social disapproval into territory that threatened family relationships and community belonging. Elena, Miguel, and Sofia found themselves defending their family's achievements to classmates and neighbors who questioned whether the Santos family was betraying community values through excessive ambition. The criticism forced them to articulate values and priorities they had never needed to examine explicitly. Why do people think it's wrong for Mama to use her abilities? Elena asked during a family dinner that had become a strategy session for managing community pressure. Rosa taught her valuable knowledge. Why shouldn't she benefit from understanding chemistry that creates jobs for other people? Miguel's perspective reflected the practical wisdom that had characterized his approach to problems since childhood. They're jealous because Mama's success makes them feel bad about their own circumstances. It's easier to criticize her than to examine why they haven't created similar opportunities. Sofia's artistic sensibility provided insights that surprised Maria with their emotional sophistication. They want us to stay poor so they can feel better about being poor themselves. Success makes them question choices they don't want to examine. The conversation revealed how profoundly the community pressure was affecting her children's understanding of achievement, ambition, and social responsibility. They were learning lessons about human nature and social dynamics that would shape their own approaches to success and failure throughout their lives. Maria found herself caught between gratitude for professional recognition and anxiety about social consequences that threatened to isolate her family from the community that had sustained them through difficult times. Success, she was discovering, required navigating complex relationships between personal advancement and social responsibility. Late that evening, as she studied Rosa's notebook and prepared formulations for the next day's experiments, Maria reflected on the delicate balance between honoring traditional knowledge and embracing modern opportunities. Rosa had somehow managed to bridge those worlds without losing connection to her cultural heritage or community relationships. Perhaps the key lay in using success to create opportunities for others rather than simply rising above shared circumstances. The organic soap line could employ neighbors who understood traditional ingredient preparation. The product development laboratory could become a training center where community members learned marketable skills. As she fell asleep to the familiar sounds of Barangay San Isidro settling into night, Maria carried with her both excitement about professional possibilities and determination to find ways of advancing that honored both personal ambition and community belonging. Rosa's legacy deserved recognition, but it also demanded wisdom about the responsibilities that accompanied success. Part 9. Mounting pressure from all sides. The confrontation began on a Wednesday morning that had started like any other, with Maria arriving at the factory before dawn to review the previous night's test results from her latest organic soap formulation. She was absorbed in analyzing the pH stability data when Tommy Valdez approached her laboratory station with an expression that immediately signaled trouble. "We need to talk," he said quietly, closing the laboratory door behind him with the deliberate care that suggested the conversation would require privacy. "There have been some complaints about your work performance and professional conduct." Maria set down her testing equipment with hands that had suddenly become unsteady, her mind racing through possible explanations for such criticism. Her work quality had been consistently excellent. Her laboratory procedures followed established protocols precisely, and her new formulations were exceeding performance expectations in every measurable category. "What kind of complaints?" she asked, keeping her voice level despite the anxiety that was building in her chest like pressure before a typhoon. Tommy consulted his clipboard with the uncomfortable efficiency of someone delivering unwelcome news according to official procedures. "Father Antonio Cruz submitted a formal letter to Carlos questioning your moral character and suggesting that your rapid advancement reflects inappropriate favoritism rather than professional competence." The accusation hit Maria like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her legs suddenly weak. Religious authority carried enormous weight in Filipino business culture, and Father Cruz's criticism could damage her reputation in ways that would extend far beyond immediate employment concerns. "He claims that your lifestyle has changed dramatically since beginning work here," Tommy continued, reading from what appeared to be an official complaint document. "Expensive clothes, improved living conditions, and behavior that suggests income sources beyond your declared salary." Maria felt anger rising alongside fear as she processed the implications of such accusations. Father Cruz was suggesting that she was involved in illegal activities or inappropriate relationships, using circumstantial evidence to support character assassination that could destroy everything she had worked to achieve. "My lifestyle has improved because I have steady employment at a good salary," she replied, struggling to maintain professional composure while her world seemed to be shifting beneath her feet. "Everything I own was purchased with money I earned through honest work." Tommy's expression suggested sympathy mixed with administrative obligation, the look of someone who was required to investigate serious allegations regardless of his personal opinions about their validity. "I'm required to document your response to these complaints and conduct a review of your work history and performance records." The investigation process would involve scrutiny of her personal finances, interviews with coworkers and supervisors, and examination of her laboratory procedures and results. Even if the accusations proved groundless, the formal inquiry would create suspicion and doubt that could undermine her professional relationships and future advancement opportunities. More immediately threatening was the possibility that Father Cruz's religious authority could influence Carlos's business decisions. Filipino entrepreneurs often maintained close relationships with local clergy, seeking spiritual guidance for major business choices and considering religious approval an important factor in maintaining community support. That afternoon, Maria found herself summoned to Carlos's office for what Tommy described as a routine administrative meeting, though the formal language could not disguise the serious nature of the situation. Carlos's office reflected the success of his business: modern furniture, awards from industry organizations, and photographs documenting the factory's growth from garage startup to regional manufacturer. "I've received some concerning information about your personal conduct," Carlos began without preamble, his direct communication style now feeling threatening rather than refreshingly honest. "Father Cruz suggests that your advancement within the company has been unusually rapid for someone with your educational background." Maria met his gaze with the steady confidence she had learned from Roberto during his own confrontations with suspicious supervisors and prejudiced employers. "My advancement reflects the quality of my work and the value of knowledge I inherited from Rosa Delgado. Every promotion has been based on demonstrated competence and measurable results." Carlos studied her face with the same focused attention he had shown during their technical discussions, but now his evaluation seemed to be assessing character rather than chemistry knowledge. "Father Cruz implies that your income exceeds what you could reasonably earn through factory employment alone." The suggestion struck Maria as particularly unfair because it reflected assumptions about appropriate compensation for workers from poor backgrounds rather than objective evaluation of her contributions to company profitability. Her salary was entirely justified by the value she created through quality control improvements and product development innovations. I receive 800 pesos daily plus performance bonuses based on successful product launches, she replied, producing documentation that supported her stated income. Every peso has been earned through honest work that has generated profits for this company. Carlos examined her employment records with the thoroughness that characterized his approach to all business decisions, noting performance evaluations, salary increases, and the measurable improvements in product quality that had accompanied her advancement through different positions within the company. Your work quality is exemplary, he admitted after reviewing the documentation. But Father Cruz's concerns reflect community sentiment that could affect our business relationships if left unaddressed. The comment revealed the complex dynamics that connected individual employee reputation to broader business success in communities where personal relationships and social approval influenced commercial decisions. Father Cruz's criticism threatened not only Maria's employment, but also the factories standing within local networks that affected everything from supplier relationships to government permits. What would you like me to do? Maria asked, though. She suspected that any response would require compromises that could undermine her professional advancement or family security. Carlos leaned back in his chair with the expression of someone weighing competing priorities and calculating potential consequences. Take a temporary leave of absence while we conduct a thorough review of these allegations. Full pay, but stay away from the factory until we can resolve this situation. The proposal struck Maria as fundamentally unfair. Punishment preceding investigation, guilty until proven innocent, professional opportunities suspended based on religious criticism rather than objective evidence. The temporary leave could easily become permanent termination if community pressure proved stronger than business logic. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.